Thank you guys so much. It's a beautiful, beautiful worship set, kind of a walk through the ages. And the older we get, the more times when we look back, it seems to me that seems so short. and so it's Troy texted me that my text yesterday morning for age. We send each other texts all the time about how old we are, and this was yesterday. He said, my grandson Finn, who's 12, just found a quarter that he was excited about that was a 2001 quarter. And he said, then I thought about it, and he said, I realized that if I had found a quarter when I was 12, it would have been 1958, and of the same time frame. And I was like, okay, thanks for my old moment. So there you go. So this morning, we're going back to the book of James. We're getting to the second chapter this week, and so we've been 4 weeks in chapter 1. We've talked about the book of James. We've referred to it as getting kicked in the teeth. I've heard pastors call it a spiritual 2 before. I've heard it called religion in street clothes. A lot of things that you can use to refer to the book of James. But anyway, we're looking at how we live out the truths of the Bible in a guide to life. How do we take the truths of the Scripture and apply them to today's world and the world that we live in and where we are? And so today we're going to look at favoritism. And also we're going to look at the worth of an individual. And I want to begin by looking, and I was digging just a little bit, Mahatma Gandhi. Some of you guys know who Gandhi was, and he was obviously Indian culture, Hindu. But there was a time in his life that he was in South Africa, and he was really searching. He was in a searching time of his life, and he became intrigued by the teachings of Jesus. And he also became intrigued by the gospel and the gospel message. And he thought, well, I want to check this out. I want to learn more. I want to dig more into this. And so he decided to go to a church and to a church meeting and to see what he could discover. And he was in South Africa, and he went to the door of the church, and he was met at the door of the church by an usher. And because of the color of his skin, was not allowed to be a part of that meeting. And so when asked about that later, and there's a lot of different disparities about exactly how this came to be, but he was suggested that he worship with his own people. And so, and this is kind of what he said when referred to. He said, if Christians have caste differences also, I might as well remain a Hindu. And this is what, when asked about it, this is what he said. He said, I really like your Christ. I just don't like your Christians. Your Christians are so unlike your Christ. That is very convicting, right? So whether or not that happened exactly that way, something similar to that happens a lot, okay? It happens a lot. It happens more frequently. It happens in this county, and especially in the past. And we'll talk about a little bit about that coming on as we go. And what a cool thing that this is on this day, because Living Faith was established 28 years ago, and the thing about Living Faith is that it was an attempt by a group of believers who wanted to go and establish a church that was kind of different than what we had come to expect. Because there were certain things that people expected from churches. For example, I have preached in churches that if I showed up at the door wearing what I have on now, I went a little bit lighter on the jeans this morning just for the purpose, so you could see it. If I showed up at some of the churches, they would have met me at the door and went, can we get you a jacket or some pants, right? Because it would be like they couldn't handle it. They wouldn't be able to handle it. They would just really cook their brains. And so Living Faith has always been a church that said, hey, come in what you got, come on. And we just want you here. And so they had that welcoming attitude. And we don't have to have, the most immaculate place to be, right? I mean, you got started out in the Pleasant Ridge School. Far from immaculate, okay? And so it didn't have to be that way. And so there's a lot of things that we have kind of migrated. We like to migrate back to the Old Testament a lot. We like to go back to that temple worship and build these elaborate things. And so we want to dig into this because this is the thing. Whether we like to believe it or not, we have a tendency to create a standard by which we believe someone should, and we tend to judge. And there's a word. And so when someone doesn't meet our standard of Christianity, then we tend to look at them differently. And James, in the if you look at the little subheading there in my Bible, it says favoritism forbidden. And so we just want to jump in here to James chapter 2, look at the first 4 verses, and then we're going to go from there. My brothers and sisters, believers in our glorious Lord Jesus Christ, must not show favoritism. Suppose a man comes into your meeting wearing a gold ring and fine clothes, and a poor man in filthy old clothes also comes in. If you show special attention to the man wearing fine clothes and say, here's a great seat for you, but you say to the poor man, you stand there or sit down here on the floor by my feet, have you not discriminated among yourselves and become judges with evil thoughts? Favoritism forbidden. We're going to look at 3 reasons why God says this, why favoritism is forbidden. And number 1 is the obvious, that favoritism is simply ungodly. Okay? Favoritism is looking at a person from the outward appearance and then judging them accordingly. Okay? Looking at a person from the outward appearance and then judging them accordingly. And I'm not talking about physical appearance, but how somebody may be living their lives, or how we think they're living their lives based on what we've seen or what we've heard. Now we're digging into some all kinds. Now we're into gossip. Now we're into all kinds of things, right? This is what favoritism really is. Favoritism, when we look down upon someone, we are diminishing a person, and we are diminishing someone who's made in the image of God, because we all are. And so when we try to diminish somebody who's made in the image of God, we're diminishing God. Look at this again. Suppose a man comes into your meeting wearing a gold ring and fine clothes, and a poor man comes in filthy old clothes, and you show special attention to the man wearing fine clothes and say, here's a good seat for you, but say to the poor man, you stand there or sit on the floor by my feet. Our society is wired this way. Okay, you experience it. Okay, if you've ever flown in an airplane on an airliner, you understand what I'm talking. Especially if you've been on a plane that has a first class section, right? They don't all have first class. They have better seats, preferential seating, extra row seating, whatever. But some planes have first class, right? And I flew when I was in Alaska this summer. I flew American Airlines out of Nashville, and the plane going to Nashville was just a regular 737. But when we got on the plane in Chicago and flew to Vancouver, it had a first class section, right? And so when everybody was seated and everybody was in, and then they come back, and not only it has a first class section, but they come in, they grab that curtain, and they go, zoop, and they close that curtain. They have their own flight attendant, they have their own thing up front, and we're back in the back, right? And so we separate ourselves. All right, and maybe if you've never experienced that, then you just bought the cheapest ticket that you could get on Southwest because you wanted to go to Florida for a while, and then you're in that line, and so you're in the D section, right? And so you're back here, and you're looking at all these people that have all lined up. Okay, you ever been in that situation? I've been in that situation before, and I'm like, I'm in the middle row. I am in the middle row, right? I've got the middle seat. That's going to be me. Okay, so we do that. We classify things based on how much money that you had or how much money you spent. We're impressed by the cars that people drive. I have a fleet, okay? It's a small fleet. I have 6 cars in my fleet, right? The fleet was all in port yesterday. They were all at my house, and so we had them all lined up. And so, and Kevin Bird, he always laughs when I say this because he was working on one of them one time, and he said, that's one of your spares, isn't it? I said, Kevin, they're all spares. They're all spares. And so they range in age from a 2016 down to a 1999. And Sandy has, she gets to drive the Lincoln, right? And so it's the nicest one that we have. And so I'm really happy. I've learned this, though, about cars and spending money on cars. The second 100,000 miles is much cheaper than the first. And then I had the 1999 Camry that Mom and Dad bought new in 1999. And now it has 250,000 miles. The windows don't roll down, and it kind of shakes, Steve, when you drive it, but it still gets 30 miles a gallon, and I refuse to part with it, right? Because I'm cheap. And so I drive this thing. And so the way people perceive me, when I pull up in that Camry, people look at me sometime and they're like, are you okay? Right? I get that sometimes. When I pull up in the Lincoln, they're like, that's really nice, right? And so we judge people sometimes by what they're riding in, right? We also judge people by what they're wearing, right? We judge people by what they're wearing and the clothes that they have and those things. It just happens. We judge people by the jobs that they have, by the degrees they have, by the possessions. Gail Irwin's I used to love listening to Gail on the Christian Family Radio back in the day. And this was a funny story that he told once. He said, I was in this meeting, and he said, we were all introducing. Yeah, I hate it when we have to introduce ourselves, right? And so we're introducing ourselves, and he said, everybody's going around the room. And he said, this room was full of doctors, and there was attorneys, and everybody's going around like, I'm so-and-so, I'm invented this, and I'm a doctor of neuroscience. And he's like, I'm a pastor. What am I going to say? So he said, it comes to me, and I stood up and said, hi, my name's Gail. I lip sync the voice of God. And everybody was just kind of looking, right? We try to make things more impressive than what they really are. Here's the thing. God is not concerned with your outward appearance. God looks at the heart. God is not concerned with what you possess. God is concerned with what possesses you. Because sometimes our money, our possessions, our cars, our things become our God. And He's concerned with the motivation of our heart. He's concerned with the way we treat people. Listen, we have to be careful because we spend a lot of time on social media, okay? I don't know what your screen time is, but I know what my screen time is. It tells me every week, and I'm like, holy cow, right? We spend a lot of time on social media. Guys, let's just be honest, okay? It's a factory of jealousy and judgment. I mean, it's just there for it. It's just ripe for it because you're just sitting there, man. And if you don't believe this, hey, one of my favorite things to do with my family has been to go on trips on spring break and fall break because it's the time that teachers have off. It's like I'm taking that off and I'm just going to go. And so I love traveling. Don't travel for one of those weeks and then get on social media, right? Try that one on for size, right? You're like, oh, I hate you, right? Okay, it's one of those like, I can't believe it. So it is. It becomes that. And so we have to be very careful with that because we can begin to just kind of start digging down into this thing. And so here's the thing. We don't know what we're looking at, all right? I'm going to rat him out, okay? Troy Richards is one of my best friends. And so a couple of weeks ago or 3 or 4 weeks ago, into the end of summer, summer's over, it's time to get back to work. He was in the mountains with his whole family, and now there are 19 Richards, okay? There's 19 of them, okay? And so they want a picture. And so he starts sending me these pictures that they're getting, and they're horrible. I mean, it's just like the kids are screaming, and everybody's just like all this stuff. And then they post a picture, and it's great. And I'm like, how did you get that picture? He said, that is a combination of 5 pictures and 2 weeks of work, right? He said, because I knew I had to fix it if I didn't. He said, Kristen would take the one that she looked good in and she would post it with everybody else in there. And it's like, so I got to fix this thing. And so in the picture that's posted, you can see the mountains. When they took the picture, you couldn't even see the mountains. He went back and took a picture of just the place where they took the picture so he could edit it all together. We don't know what we're looking at when we look on social media. And now with AI, holy cow, be careful. My logarithm sends me a lot of pastor and ag teacher posts, okay? And I'll see those posts sometimes, and I'm going through there, and I'm like, why would you post that? Why would you say that? Why would you do that? I'm being judgmental, okay? I'm being judgmental without even thinking about being judgmental. Here's the thing. What I'm really saying is I know best. I know better than you. We have no business judging anybody that we don't know personally, okay? Now, that's another sermon for another day that we've preached before and we'll preach again. But there's a place for that. You say, we're not supposed to judge. Well, unless, okay? Right, it's the whole log in the eye and the speck in the eye, and you get yourself straight, I'll get myself straight. We'll be in an accountability relationship, and when I see you heading down a bad road, I'm going to get in front of you and say, dude, stop. You're ruining your life, okay? Because I love you. Right? If you don't have that kind of relationship with somebody, then you don't have any business in judging them. It's a lot easier to extend grace than it is to extend judgment. We can't judge somebody based on their post on social media. We don't even know how they made them. We don't even know how they got them. You don't know someone's heart until you really know them. Living Faith welcomes people from all over the county and multiple counties, okay? If y'all have never really looked at our congregation, we don't just live around this church, okay? They don't just live around the building here. People live everywhere. They live in Hartford, they live in Beaver Dam, and I live 30 minutes away. I live on the Butler County line, right? I can run to Butler County, Steve, and I can't run very far, okay? Maybe I can't now, if I go downhill, okay? And I can. We live everywhere, and so we welcome people from all over the county. It doesn't matter where you live. It doesn't matter where you're from. We need to strive to be the most welcoming church in the community. And you know what? If somebody else attends another church, that's great. Okay? Living Faith is of the size that it's easy to visit here. Okay? It's a big building, a lot of things going on, a lot of people moving and going. You can kind of slip in here. Thank God you get greeted at the door now. Bless those guys' hearts. Okay? We love it. All right? So at least you can't sneak in unnoticed. We know you're here, right? But if you come in here, you get greeted, and it's a welcoming church. We try to be that, okay? Some churches, and I know this because I grew up in one, that if a new person shows up at the church, and then especially if you show up 1 minute late, oh, holy cow, and you open the back door that's immediately into the sanctuary, and everybody goes, who's that, right? And you're like, whoa, I've stepped in, right? And so if you go in, you get greeted and your hand shook by every person, all 15 people in the building, right? They all shake your hand. Who are you? Where'd you come from? What are you driving? What are you wearing? Right? And you're like, whoa, I didn't know this, right? We want to be a welcoming church. We don't want to be a judgmental church. We want to be, everybody comes in. Here's the thing. We want every church in Ohio County to be successful, and Davis County, and McLean County, and Hancock, all of them, right? Here's a little secret for you. If you didn't know the answer to this, I'm just going to tell you. If everybody in Ohio County got up this morning and said, hey, it's Sunday, let's go to church, there's not enough seats. There's not enough seats in this county if we use the high school gym, included with every other church. We only can seat 5,000. There's 22,000 people in this county. On a good day, on Easter, there may be 3,000. So you try that out. We don't have enough, so we need everybody to be successful. We don't be judgmental on somebody who's being successful or more successful than we are. That's not how God works. Number 2, favoritism is not only, it's unreasonable, okay? It's unreasonable. Let's go a little deeper in James. James 2:5 says, listen, my dear brothers and sisters, has not God chosen those who are poor in the eyes of the world to be rich in faith and to inherit the kingdom he promised those who love him? But you've dishonored the poor. Is it not the rich who are exploiting you? Are they not the ones who are dragging you into court? Are they not the ones who are blaspheming the noble name of him to whom you belong? God has always had a connection to the poor and the poor in the spirit. And so I want to chase this rabbit down the road a little bit, and then we're going to turn. The opening line of the Sermon on the Mount, okay? Blessed are the poor. Jesus is referring to more than just monetary poverty, but he's referring to spiritual poverty. Here's the thing about poverty. When a person is poor, then they are highly dependent upon someone else. All right? They're highly dependent upon someone else when they're in that world, and so they need to have someone care for them. Here's what Jesus is really saying, and this is what we have to kind of understand. We never need to be in a place where we are so financially independent that we don't need God. Because that does not exist, okay? That does not exist. We try to sometimes build these walls and build these castles and build these things, but it never happens. That we never need to be so rich ourselves that we never need God. When Jesus went to Nazareth, when he returned to Nazareth after his ministry began, all the way back in Luke chapter 4, they handed him a scroll when he went into the synagogue, and this is when he unrolled it. This is what it said, Luke 4:18. The Spirit of the Lord is on me because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. Jesus was born and if you're going to list the cities in Israel, which one is the poorest, which one's at the bottom of the list? Let's go with Bethlehem, okay? That's where he came out of. And then he grew up in the next one, which was Nazareth. So much so that when the disciples were like, Nazareth? Prentice? Schultztown? Anything good come out of there? Hey, can anything good come out of there? I mean, come on. And so that's where he came from. That's where he grew up. God has always had an affection for the poor. And here's the thing that we need to not get confused. It doesn't mean there's some, and I won't go down that rabbit hole, but there was a place where people were like, well, if you have money or if you're rich or if you're anything, then you can't be a good Christ follower. And that's not true. It's where our heart is when it concerns that. And he doesn't want us to have that. It's not money, it's the love of money, right? God blesses people. He blesses people financially. And he uses the poor to advance the gospel, but he also uses the rich. Now here's a little secret for you too, if you didn't know this. If you live in America, you're rich. You have more money in your ashtray than most people. We don't even have ashtrays anymore, okay? We don't even have it. You have more money in your console of your car, right? That's all we used it for years is for change. That's more money than most people in other countries have. If you own a house and a car, you're in the top 3% of wage earners on the planet Earth, okay? If you have indoor plumbing, it's amazing, right? Go to Bangladesh and talk to those people. They have to go out of their homes and go to public toilets just to go to the bathroom because they don't have bathrooms in their homes. We don't even understand how people live. We're extremely wealthy as a nation, just all of us. We have things that we don't even realize we have and how much it is for us. God He's used Americans to finance missions around the globe. Okay? He's used he's always done this. This week, okay? If you have followed me on social media, you saw me post a post about a contribution that was made this week to the Kentucky FFA Foundation. The Martin Gatton, Bill Gatton Foundation, he passed away just a couple of years ago. He's given money to a lot of really cool things, and he donated $11 million to the Kentucky FFA Foundation. That's a big amount, okay? $11 million. And so I did a little research on him because it's interesting to me because he gave $180 million to the UK College of Agriculture, and there's his name's all over the campus, and so just tons of money. And he in one bank transaction that he sold all of his assets to BB&T for $3.3 billion. Okay, so he had some available cash, and so his original goal in life, and this is where he kind of came from. His original goal in life was to make a lot of money and retire at 40, right? And that's what he wanted to do. And I've been there, not that kind of money, but just get that idea like I just want to work and then I can retire young or retire early. And I've learned now that I'm at the age that I'm at, it's like that's not a goal. You don't get to a place and quit. You just get to a place and do more. And so for Mr. Gatton, he got to a place, he said, well, I'll retire when I'm 40. And then he got to 40, and he's like, that doesn't feel right. I'll wait till 50. And he got to 50, and he said, well, that didn't feel right. And he got to 60, and he's like, wait a minute. I'm just going to work forever. And as much money as I can make, and then I'm going to give all of it away to the best causes that I can give it to. And it's like, oh, he caught on. He caught on because none of it's his. He died when he was 89. Now he didn't have any of it, right? But he has eternity, right, if he knew the Lord. And so we realize that God uses people who have financial wealth. He used Nicodemus. You remember Nick at night, right? Nicodemus, the most famous conversation in the world. It's the one where John kind of steps out and says, "For God so loved the world, that gave His one and only Son." John 3:16. Okay, he was talking to Nick. Nick was wealthy. How do we know Nicodemus was wealthy? He was on the Sanhedrin. They all were. They all were. None of those people were poor people that they went out on the street somewhere. And these were all upstanding, highly thought of people that were on the Sanhedrin, and he was. Matthew, he may have been looked down upon, but his pockets was full of money, all right? Because he was a tax collector, and he was collecting taxes and stuff, and his pocket's full. He had money. Zacchaeus, he was so afraid somebody was going to stab him in the back, he climbed a tree, right? And we know his cash flow was incredible because what did he say? I'm going to pay everybody back that I've wronged. I'm going to pay them back times 4. Takes a lot of cash to be able to do that. And then this one, Matthew 27, verse 57. This is following the crucifixion of Jesus. Jesus had died on the cross and his body was hanging on the cross. In the Roman tradition, that's where they left the body. Okay, they just left it there. They left it there as a reminder to everybody else that this is what happens to you if you defy the Roman government. They just leave it there. But that's not what happened to Jesus. We know that Jesus was buried in a tomb, and 3 days later he rose from the grave. So how did that all come about? Verse 57 says, as evening approached, there came a what kind of man? A rich man. A rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who had himself become a disciple of Jesus. He went to Pilate. He had access. And he asked for Jesus' body. We know from culture and other writings that when somebody got a body off the cross, it was typically paid for. And Pilate ordered that it be given to him. Joseph took the body, wrapped it up in a clean linen cloth, and placed it where? In his own tomb that he owned, that he had cut out of the rock. And he rolled a big stone in front of the entrance to the tomb and went away. Listen, God used the wealth of Joseph of Arimathea to bury his own son. So God uses it. It's his. It's all his. And he uses it. We just have to be open to allow him to use what he has been given or what we have been given. Remember, Jesus never taught against wealth. He talked a lot about money being our God. God is not concerned with what you possess. He's concerned with what possesses you. It's impressive when we sit with kings, but when is the last time that you sat with the poor? I have been blessed to be in some cool places, okay? I have been in some cool places with some cool people, right? And so I appreciate that. I took a group of kids one time to visit Capitol Hill, and we scheduled congressional visits, and this was back in 1995, and our senators were Senator Ford, and Senator McConnell he was just kind of beginning then. And so we went and visited with Senator McConnell, and we had a photo op with him and everything. And then we went to Senator Ford's office, and we went in and told the person, we said, we're here to see Senator Ford. And she said, he'll be down in just a minute. And so we're standing there, and Wendell comes in, and he opens the door, and he goes, hey, guys, come on in here. And so we go down the hall with Wendell, and he takes us to his private office. And he goes in, and there's a big couch, and he said, have a seat. And I sat down next to Wendell, and he said, tell me where you guys are going, And he said, well, we're from Ohio County. Oh, yeah, I know people in Owensboro. And so we just had this really cool visit, and it was just awesome. And so I've been in places like that are just really cool. I see people that are in elected offices, and I talk to them, I know them and everything. And so those are cool things. Those are neat when you get to go do those things. But when I was studying for this, the question came to me, how long has it been since you sat with the poor? And I've told this story before, and some of you have heard it, but I remember back at New Harmony, my cousin Angie, they were really working hard with a ministry in Nashville to the homeless. And so this is kind of their thing that they did and everything. And so they would make backpacks, and they would take down. Sometimes they would go down and actually spend the night on the street in Nashville, and just to connect and just to get to talk and find out what their stories are and everything. And she would come back and tell me all these things. And she's like, you got to go. I said, okay, you tell me when. You put it together, you schedule it, and we'll do it. We'll go. And she said, okay. And so we had this deal, and so we did church, and we finished church one Sunday afternoon, and we had this group of people that were all going to go, and so we all loaded up. We had backpacks, we had sandwiches and chips and drinks and all this stuff and tables, and loaded all up in the van, and we drive down to Nashville. And so we get down there. And so the Stephen Curtis Chapman, I can't remember the name of the song, he wrote the song about the Church Street corner and the homeless that were there. And so that's where we were at. We were right there in the heart of Nashville. And so there were all these homeless would gather in this park. It was a little park. And so we go down, and I have not. Did you go on that trip? Were you with us? Okay, you weren't. And so we were going, and I'll never forget. I pull into a parking place, and I get out, and I have one foot on the ground, and one foot is still in the car, and trying to get out. And all of a sudden, this guy's in my face, and he's like, "You got $20?" He said, "My car's broke down here," and he said, "I'm not homeless or anything," and I'm like, "What is who are you?" And then I hear Angie behind me going, "Bernard, you ain't got no car. You quit lying to him." She said, "We're here to feed you all. You get down there." And he's like, "Oh, Angie, I didn't see you. I'm sorry." And he's heading back down. And so here we go. And I'm like, she runs this place. And so we go in. And I'm not a street preacher. I'm kind of uncomfortable. I was really outside of my comfort zone. And so I'm up here standing on this rock in the middle of this park in downtown Nashville, and I'm preaching the gospel to these people. And so it was cool. And so the kids all did a song, and we sang. And so then we got them together, and they had a leader. Okay, this girl she was their kind of the person that they looked to. And, so they all were just living on the street. But she'd be like, "All right, people." She said, "These people have come down here to be nice to us, and we're going to be nice to them. We're going to be orderly, and we're going to get in a line." And so they all lined up, and we gave them their sandwiches and their backpacks. And so everybody's sitting around in the park, right? And they're all eating. And I'm sitting there, and I'm talking to this guy who was a veteran. And he was telling me that he only stays in towns like Nashville that have a veterans hospital because he wants to be able to have care. And so I was getting to know him. And so then Anita and Jean, two of the sweet ladies in our church, comes over to me, and they said, "Greg, we've been over here talking to this young man named Dale. And we're worried about him. He seems very depressed, and we're concerned that he might be even suicidal." She said, "We wanted you to come and talk to him and pray with him." And I said, "Sure." And so I get up and I go over where Dale is, and I just plop down on the street corner there, and I'm just leaned up against this wall, and Dale's there, and I was like, "Hey, Dale." I said, "How's it going, man?" He said, "Oh, well, it's been better." And he's telling me his story and telling me things, and so I just asked him. I said, "Dale," I said, how'd you wind up on the streets in Nashville?" He said, "Well, I got into it with my boss," and he said, "We've been at it," and he said, I just, I quit my job, and he said, I had to get away from that. And I said, "Dale, what'd you do?" He said, "I was with the carnival." I said, "With the carnival? Holy cow." I said, "All right." And so we're talking. And so we kept talking about this, all kinds of things. And I said, "How do you travel around? Where'd you come from? How did you get down from here?" And he said, "Well, the carnival that I was with," he said, "we go to Florida in the wintertime." He said, "But in the summertime," he said, "we're typically in Tennessee and Kentucky." And I said, "Okay." And so we're talking, and he He looks at me and he says, you know, you look familiar to me. I said, you kind of look familiar to me too. I said, so where do you all travel to? He said, where are you all from? He said, what town are you all from? I said, Beaver Dam, Kentucky. He said, the Strawberry Festival. He said, you the barbecue guy. I said, you know me. I said, holy cow. In the homeless community in Nashville, somebody knows who I am. This is crazy. And then I was like, you run the fun slide. Because I would trade him barbecue sandwiches because he was hungry, and I would give him barbecue sandwiches, and my girls would, Taylor and Michaela, would ride the fun slide for free on the thing when we weren't doing much, and we would just sit around, and so I was in the RC wagon. And I told him, I said, Dale, I said, God brought me here today for a reason. And I said, it's not an accident. I said, this is God ordained. And I said, you know, of all of the famous people, or all of the wealthy people, or all of the people in positions of power that I have sat and had a sandwich with, Dale was probably among the most important. And I was thankful that God had me there that day. And so you sit with kings, but how long has it been since you've sat with the poor? I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. Jesus came to minister to the people that most of us look over and overlook. You know, when I go to the food pantry and I go out to the cars, and I see people that I know and friends, and I try to spend some time there when I can. And when I go to the jail and we preach at the jail, the kids in there, some of the kids were my kids, and for whatever reason, you know, they're there. And I'm glad that I can spend some time with them to hope that they can find the Lord and find a right path. Third and final thing this morning, favoritism is unacceptable. It's unacceptable. James chapter 2, verses 8 and 9 says, if you really keep the royal law found in Scripture, love your neighbor as yourself, you're doing right. But if you show favoritism, you sin and are convicted by the law as lawbreakers. Here's what he's saying. God gives us a standard to live by. And one way or another, we've all done this. We've all done it. We've all been judgmental. We've all looked at this. We've all shown favoritism. Sometimes it's in our own house. So how do you get past it? How do you get past it? Here's a prayer challenge first. God, would you allow me to love people the way you love people? Be careful if you pray that prayer, because you just might. Let me show compassion to people the way you show compassion to me and to other people. You see, humility is not thinking less of yourself. Humility is thinking of yourself less or not at all, and to always put others ahead of yourself. Okay? That's why I drive the 99 Camry sometimes, because it's the least that I have, right? My kids are in better vehicles. My wife is in a better vehicle because I want to make sure they have the best, right? Now, there's some people would come out and say, well, I'm going to drive the best because I've worked hard and I deserve it. Baloney. I deserve hell, okay? I deserve hell. I'm just thankful that God saved me. A couple times at Christmas, we've unpacked Matthew chapter 1, which is the genealogy of Jesus. And when we unpack that genealogy, just pulling those names out, when you start pulling the names out of Jesus' pedigree, out of his family tree, it is a hodgepodge of crazy, right? I mean, there are harlots and prostitutes and adulterers and murderers and incest, and it's all in there, okay? You just start unpacking it and reading through the Old Testament about those people that are there, and it's like, what? Why would he put that here? What's the point of that? It is the point. It is the point. Amen. You've got rich, poor, successful, unsuccessful. Why? God doesn't show favoritism. He doesn't show favoritism. He doesn't show favorites. He doesn't have favorites. He's generous. Oh, is he generous? Sometimes we complain about generosity. You say, I would never complain about generosity. Oh, really? Matthew chapter 20, verse 1 says this. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius. What do you pay? A denarius? Not bad. I'll work for you. All right. So he sent them into his vineyard to work. they agreed to work for the day for a denarius. Well, about 9 in the morning, he went out and saw some other people standing in the marketplace. They weren't doing anything. He told them, well, you go ahead and work in the vineyard, and I'll pay you whatever is right. So they went. He went out again about noon, and again about 3 in the afternoon, did the same thing. About 5 in the afternoon, wait a minute, 5's quitting time, right? About 5 in the afternoon, he went out and found still others standing around. He said, why have you been standing here all day doing nothing? Well, no one's hired us, they answered. He said, well, you go work in the vineyard too. When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last ones I hired and going on to the first. So the workers that got hired at 5 in the afternoon came and they each received a denarius. So when those came who were hired first, well, they thought they were going to get more. But each of them also received a denarius. When they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. Those who were hired last only worked for an hour, they said, and you made them equal to us who have been borne the burden of the work in the heat of the day. But he answered one of them, I'm not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? So take your pay and go. I want to give the one who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I am generous? So the last will be first, and the first will be last. Guys, it doesn't matter when you came to faith in Christ. It only matters that you do. And I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful that God doesn't show favoritism. Some of us get irritated by this. Some people get irritated when they find out that somebody who's just been messed up their whole life comes to Christ on their deathbed. You don't always get that chance. You don't always get it. Okay? I've been in those situations. I've been in those hospital visits. Go visit this person because we think they're lost. We don't know. I go, they're in a coma. I pray, I talk. Maybe they can hear, maybe they can't. I don't know. It's God. I do what I can. But I am so glad that God is generous. It doesn't matter how long I'm a believer. I'm just glad that I am. And I'm glad that you are. God doesn't show favoritism. We're all going to the same place. If God doesn't show favoritism, then why should we? Listen, it's okay to not be okay. Listen, you didn't pick your parents, and you didn't pick your skin color. You didn't get that option. You were born, and you were born. And that was your mom and dad. And you are what you are. We have a standard that we expect. When people don't meet that standard, then we tend to criticize. 28 years ago today, Living Faith was established, and it was established as a welcoming church. We don't size you up when you come through the door. We don't look at you and go, where's your suit and where's your tie? And I have a suit. I've got a lot of ties. I'm glad I don't have to wear it to be worthy. Sometimes I wear it because I want to dress up or I want to do something for a special occasion. But is it a preference issue or is it a doctrinal issue? Dolores Cook used to say to us all the time in the Gasper River Association when somebody would say something, she would say, you got Bible for that? You got Bible for that? Sometimes it's personal. Is it about what I want? Or is it about the betterment or the furthering of the gospel? Listen, it's okay to be divided at a college football game or a basketball game, but that doesn't follow us to church, okay? That doesn't follow us to church. Has our preferences caused us to show favoritism toward any group or any people? Sometimes our own kids. I see that in households. I see that with the students that come through my classroom at times. I see their parents have a certain thing that they do, and then the kid may be different. They may not be into what mom and dad are into, or what dad was into, or what, and it's like they don't, but the other brother or sister is, and then so it's like, hey, this is my buddy, and it's like they feel that, they sense that. This is a challenge for the message for today. It's very simple. Take some time and reflect. Take some time and reflect. How do you treat others? How do you see others? When you look around, how do you judge people? What do you see? When you're on social media, what are the feelings? Are you looking at something and saying, "Man, I wish I had that," or they seem so fake, or what's going through your mind? How are you processing that when you're scrolling? Those are things we need to reflect on. I don't know. I know myself. I'm guilty, and we all, most of us are. Is that positive? Is that helpful? Is that helping us? Take some time and reflect on that. Hold every thought captive is what the Scripture says, to the glory of Christ. And allow God to reveal favoritism in your own heart. And when you do, get rid of it. It's no good. Never good. Let me pray for us. Father, we come before you and we thank you.